All right, last presentation we want to talk through today was uh, presentation we want to go over today. Follow up to um, the overall strategic planning part of this. So we've done strategic learning, understand the environment. We have started to look at internally on the IS side, what do we need to take out of that and looking over our overall information technology. Now we're going to the final part, which is the actual planning, so the IS planning part of this. So real quick, I'm not going to dwell on all these, but it will be available. And I want you to kind of review these charts and understand what we're trying to say in all this. Remember, we had that gap analysis. So we're going through that gap analysis and we're doing the planning, the option analysis, and coming up with an action plan. Can be big, small, can be pervasive, can be limited, but this is where we really start earning our money, all right? The gap analysis is going to be key to determining where we want to be, how we're going to get there. And so we come up with this current IS, you've got this gap, and you've got a business architecture that's going to flow out of it. So we've got to develop the IS plan. That means we're going to have an application direction. We're going to have an infrastructure direction. We have an organizational direction. Those three pillars are really going to drive what we're doing in information services and how we're deploying. And don't think of this in terms of business application, just the customer resource, or the ERM system or something like that. What we're talking about is overall, what solution sets are we providing? Infrastructure can be in terms of services provided, in terms of services outsourced, but what's the overall infrastructure for providing those services, and then the organization that will support it for the internal customers. So first one, business application assessment. What do they need to do? By what area? What did we look at as the core areas that we really needed to go make those investments in? Strengths and weaknesses, look for trends across applications that may drive an infrastructure solution. So there's that sort of reach across in the different parts of the direction that we're coming up with. Business requirements. How well do the systems support the actual requirements of the business? We might need to conduct interviews here, really look hard at our environment and the applications and what they're actually providing. And one of the ways that we want to look at why we allocate our resources is to do this sort of a four-quadrant look, where you've got strategic and non-strategic on the left, and unique and common on the bottom there, or on the left and right there. So if something is strategic and unique, that's something that we really want to spend our money and time on. Okay, that's where you want to get your internal people really up to speed, who understand the business, who understand the customer, focused in those areas. Okay, so if it's strategic to our success and it's unique, us as an organization, those are the areas that companies really make a difference on when they invest a lot there. We want to do that with our own people. If it's non-strategic, but kind of unique, then we could probably just outsource it, right? Get someone else to do it. If it's strategic, but it's common across our industry, then we'll just use packages. Whatever the best packages are out there, we'll get those. But we don't want to spend time reinventing something that everyone else already has anyway. Just go get it. Don't waste your resources and time on it. And if it's non-strategic and common, then again, we use those packages for those kinds of things too. Now, computing architecture. This is going to be driven by your business objectives, not by the newest technology. Always keep this in mind. Remember, we did our strategic learning. We're being driven by the business. We have to know what the latest stuff is out there, but be ready to say no to a lot of new technology if it doesn't necessarily add value to what we're trying to accomplish. Everything has to have a business case. If there's value to it, we'll look at it. But if we don't need to maintain, if we need to maintain records, like in this example, for 30 years, architecture should reflect that, not the latest favorite technology. What's the actual architecture we need? Let the objectives lead to those architecture decisions, not the technologists who have the greatest new ideas. Despite what the trade shows have, they're good for informing. They aren't what you need to go purchase. The infrastructure itself, once you've decided what that needs to be, make sure you can summarize that and explain to leadership in a simple way what the infrastructure is going to go, what we're going to go do with the infrastructure, and why it is important. This is one I wanted to draw out specifically because infrastructure is a very dry presentation to a lot of leadership. So spending time to make sure they understand what you're trying to do with an infrastructure investment plan is really important. If you can get leadership to understand why the infrastructure, the way we're setting up these different architectures is going to make a difference for the business, it's going to be a lot easier to actually get the revenue and the budget and everything to go in and actually make that happen. Then there's the information architecture. Again, understand who owns the data, why it's important, look at things like the CRUD acronym so you understand some of these things a little bit better. But you're going to need to, especially in the big data environment where we have accesses across different parts of the cloud architecture to different parts of data, we're really going to need to understand who owns all of this information and where it fits. Okay, so don't forget that this is an important element of that because it can potentially even drive some of your service, some of your infrastructure architecture solutions. And then you do an operating vision assessment. Can this business operating vision that we are thinking about be achieved with the systems that we are providing today? Does it meet the requirements? If we do these investments, will it be able to support what the business wants to go be able to do? And if not, what are those mods that we need to make? And again, you can tie those back into the presentation of the architecture to say, look, we need to make these changes because this is what you want to do as a business, and this is what we actually need to go do. So this helps you to determine where the focus should be. A lot of times technology is good enough if it's improved a little, okay? So, again, keep the focus on the areas where they're really going to make a difference to the overall competitive situation of the business. Don't always be throwing money after technology just because you fear that you're going to be left behind or you need to keep up with some particular aspect of the technology. Focus in the areas that make the biggest difference. Then finally, get into the organization. How close does the environment match what our IS needs are going to be in terms of the overall organization? Our computing environment, does it match up? How close does our staffing match up? Do we have a service architecture gap? Okay. Do we have too many people that can do help desk stuff and not enough people that can do customer support on different areas? Do we have the right technology expertise in-house to actually provide those unique solutions that we're going to need? So look at your service architecture and grade it. Are we putting our people in those most important projects, on those critical, unique, strategic areas? Is that where our smartest people are? Are our smartest people over in infrastructure or some of the places where they're more comfortable, right? Over time, they've gotten in places where they're comfortable. Make the changes that you need to support the service architecture for the business and to build up its competitive picture going forward. This gap summary then should cover those three areas. You have information management. What are the gaps in each of these areas? Technologies and staffing. Your technical leadership, and your business knowledge areas and staffing. Are you covering all of those appropriately? And then technology, the product-related environment, the computing network. Do we have what we need? And an overall information management, including the infrastructure, but also that understanding of the data sets for the customers, how all that is architected. Do we have all these covered? What are the gaps in all these? And then focus on what are going to be the major project implementation areas for those different parts of it. Out of that, we should be able to set up our objectives. What are we going to do and what are we not going to do this year? This can change based on new ideas from the gap analysis, but in the interim, it's going to give us a good place to start on this year's projects. Align them up to the business objectives. We got all that alignment that we talked about from strategic learning coming into the IS department. Now you're got staff basically that's analyzing new stuff, taking a great deal of time and essentially prioritizing your projects at a high level. So only the prioritized projects at a certain cost level are going to get pulled into this. But out of this, you're going to have objectives that drive the overall themes of your strategic learning into your IS department and into what we're actually investing in and executing on and expecting all of our service architecture and all employees to be able to act on. When we look at all those projects that we can go do, and we'll get into this in the final week of the class, we're going to have to do prioritization, right? There's a number of ways to do that. We walk through this. There's a business objective. So which of these actually matches closely to the business objectives? That's one thing we need to do. Then if there are a lot of them are there, which a lot of times you get a lot of things that are just really tied well with business objectives, we have to do a forced ranking. So you get a lot of input from a lot of different people, and you kind of just weigh one against the other, and you're going to go down the list and bubble sort all these things through to find which is which pops up to be the ones that we want to invest in the most. And there's business criteria, which is similar to the business objective, but it's going to be based on operations and on the future. So when you get into some of the things like infrastructure investments. Sometimes it's harder to tie those directly to your business objectives, but you're going to have things like obsolescence, uh, 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 regulatory requirements that you're going to have to map into business criteria. So you got to consider some of those things too. But either way, however you're doing the prioritization, you do this with executive involvement. They'll see the science and the management of the information services, and you're going to see probably a lot easier ability to get the allocation of the IS dollars that you need to make sure that you're executing in these different prioritized projects. If you have that communication and integration with the executives. Again, if we've communicated it simply, if we've driven the entire thing based on the strategic learning on where the business is going, and we can marry all that back up in a way that's simple for executives to understand and for the business to understand, then all this stuff would flow out. And that's it for the presentation.